So good evening, everyone, to the November Coaches Corner for First Tech Challenge. I'm Louis Rubo, the Team Development Education Specialist for those teams in the South. I'll also be playing the role of the Field Technical Advisor, so you'll see me around the field at the FTC meets this year. So tonight we're going to talk about a number of things. Before I dive into our agenda, just a reminder that these presentation slides will be, I haven't actually uploaded them yet, but they will be in the FTC Public Resource folder, which you can access probably right after this is over. And then within a day or so, we will have the recording also available on our YouTube playlist. Don't forget, and as I'll reference here in a moment, the public resource folder is more than just the recordings and presentation slides. It also has all the resources from the workshops as well as the schedules for the league meets. So this is what we're going to talk about tonight. I just want to touch on a couple of milestones that teams should be thinking about or reaching for at this point in the season as we're heading into the Thanksgiving break. I do want to reiterate what league play is and what teams should be thinking about. Then I want to touch on inspections because we are going to be going into our first set of formal official league meet play. So I want to talk about actually getting those robots through inspection. And then I'm going to wrap up talking about the Dean's List Award because that deadline is sneaking up on us as well. We are a small, intimate crowd, so if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. We've got people monitoring the chat. Or just go ahead and feel free to unmute and just yell at me. Be happy to stop and answer your questions. So yeah, we are sitting here now, let's see, early September, so we're in October and November. So a little over 2 months since we've seen kickoff. So we've had a chance to actually play around with the game elements this year and think strategy. So I kind of want to touch on where teams should be at, roughly speaking, at this point on the calendar, and then thinking about moving forward in terms of the competition side of things. So most importantly, and this is my soapbox part, everyone should be very comfortable and have thoroughly read through the competition manual. This year I get to say the competition manual because we have moved from a 2-game manual set from prior years to a singular 1 competition manual. It is long, but it is got all of the information you need there. So everyone should be very comfortable with this. Coaches, you should know what's in there. Gone through it maybe once yourself, but really this should be in the hands of the students. They should be the experts on it. They should be the ones studying it. I don't know, maybe not read it cover to cover. You should start in maybe with a quick skim through, knowing what the layout is, and then referencing the different sections as you are, doing those part of the program. But this is the official rules, so everyone should be very familiar with it, have a copy of it, at least digitally available at practice. When the students are asking questions, ask them what does the competition manual say of this. Yeah, so Adam, is there a book form or is it online? It is all online, and actually there's 2 versions of it online. You can download a single PDF version, and then they've also presented this year in a way kind of, I don't want to say interactive, more like a wiki style approach where you can click on certain sections and jump straight to that. I am not familiar of there being like a hard copy version out there. I mean, you're always welcome to take it to a Kinko's, or Kinko's exists anymore, or somewhere that can print it. I do kind of caution you with that though, because this is sort of a living document. And what that means is as updates are made, there are changes to the document itself. And so your version may be slightly off if you do print it out. So a digital copy is probably the best way to go, just given the way that FIRST is running updates with it. So as you're working your way through the competition manual, so where do you find it? Oh, Adam, it's right here. So the QR code there I have on the screen will take you directly to the competition manual. The other place to go is, of course, go to firstinspires.org and then go to the FTC Game and Season section, and they will have the competition manual there, as well as supporting materials such as the field setup and other documents. There we go. It's in the chat now. Thank you. So as you're working your way through the competition manual, If you're a veteran coach, you're going to notice it looks quite a bit different this year in terms of its structure and layout. If you're new to coaching this year, this is the first version you've seen, so that's great. The things you want to look for there is some color coding schemes that they're using now. Each rule has a headline to it. The headline is kind of a very short kind of sound bite of what that rule is. And depending on the color of that headline there, you're going to know if the rule is sort of evergreen, meaning is it roughly more or less the same season after season, or if it's in the FTC orange, that means it's specific to this year. So as you're looking through it, you'll recognize maybe half of the rules or more are in that green evergreen color, meaning that year after year, they're basically the same rule. The orange one is very specific to the Into the Deep game this year. And so you're going to see that scattered throughout the competition manual. So if you are a veteran coach, you will recognize a lot of the evergreen rules. There might be slight changes in wording, but more or less it is the same from prior seasons. The orange ones are very specific to this year. So just kind of a heads up with that. It does make reading through the competition manual a little bit quicker because you may be familiar with some of the older rules. So in that single competition manual, which is lengthy, admittedly, like I said, I don't know if you necessarily want to read it cover to cover straight in one sitting, but it does break down into rough sections, at least in terms of chapters. There are the general rules, and the general rules I would put in there are things like how to build the robot and what are the requirements for that robot, as well as things like the judging process and the tournaments itself. So these are all very helpful for teams when you're looking at it, studying kind of the big picture of, okay, from a program perspective, what exactly are the big picture rules? What are the requirements for a robot? What do we expect to see when we go into judging at our league tournament or at the state championships if you make it there? And then likewise, what is a tournament like? Those are all inside of the competition manual. That same document, though, also includes specifics for the Into the Deep game. So in sections, say 9, 10, and 11, you're going to find things that are very specific to this year's game. Things like what is the field and all the rules associated with it, all the terminology. It's going to break down the scoring for you as well in terms of the 3 major periods, the auto period, the teleop period, and the end game. It's also going to include in there things that specifically about penalties that are related to this year's game. All of this is now in one document. And again, just go to that competition manual. I like to go through the table of contents. If you're using the PDF format version, you can click on the table of contents headings and it'll take you straight to that section. If you're using the online version, you can go straight to those sections as well. But my major point here is this is the central document that all of us are going to reference and use in terms of the official rulings moving forward. So everyone should have familiarity with it and be ready to pull it out if we have to have a discussion about what kind of rulings we need to make at an event or in terms of things that happen before the event. So we already had one great question tonight about can the human player interact with the game pieces during the auto period? That's something we would jump straight to the competition manual to find out. Also, now that we're about a little over 2 months into the season, in terms of milestones, your team should have a functioning robot at this point. And I do kind of use the word functioning here. You definitely shouldn't have an end-all, be-all sort of robot at this point in the season, as we have not started formally competing. Also, one of the great things about league play that we use here is it allows your team to iteratively improve on that robot as the season progresses. But at this point in the season, you should have a fully functioning robot, one that should and can pass inspection. And it should be able to interact with the game elements for this year. And you should be thinking about strategies for improving the robot as the season progresses. Now, it doesn't mean that everything has to be perfect at this point. It just means that if we were to come together and have a league meet soon, say in December, then your robot should be ready to actually compete at that time. You're definitely welcome to use a number of strategies you can find online. There are some starter bots to look at. At this point, there's a lot of robots on YouTube you can get inspiration from. There's nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, your team was going to take those ideas and improve on them and make them their own. But, still look on the internet for those resources and those inspiration points. They're there to help you out. Other thing is we are more or less done with our workshops at this point. We do have one more workshop in January, which I'll touch on in a moment. One of the workshops we did have was on the auto period section of the match, which is the first 30 seconds. During that period, the robots have to completely operate on their own with no human intervention. And so as we talked about during this workshop, that's a valuable 30 seconds, is 20% of the overall match length. And there's some good strategy to think about as a team there. We also talked about during this workshop about ways to actually start programming your robot to score during that auto period. At this point in the season, your team should have some basic auto period strategy going, as well as some beginning programming. Again, like the robot itself, it shouldn't be necessarily perfect, especially because once we get in the league play, you're going to see strategy from other teams, and you might want to modify from it. But just remember, that is some low-hanging fruit in terms of points that a lot of teams overlook or don't consider, especially in the early parts of the season. That auto period is really a powerful way, and you can almost win a match just off the scoring in the auto period. So at this point in the season, your team should have a strategy down and maybe some beginning codes to do some basic things, at least in terms of parking or moving the robot in auto, and then maybe talking about actually scoring some of those game pieces as well. So I did allude to this earlier. I just want to remind you, we do have one more workshop coming up. We have a workshop on engineering portfolio. That will be on January 4th. It's a Saturday. It will be in the afternoon. It is a virtual workshop, which will talk about what is the engineering portfolio, what role does it play in terms of the judging process, what does it look like, and some best strategies for putting one together. So even though it's a virtual workshop, we do ask that you register your team for it. This is intended for both coaches and team members alike. So I do encourage you to share this with your team members and you yourself to attend. The engineering portfolio is changing from prior seasons. So even if you're a veteran coach, it's worth coming to this workshop. Some of the judging has changed in terms of what are the requirements for it and what needs to be in it. So for example, if you are interested in the control award, that has changed and its relationship to the engineering portfolio. Also just the general requirements for what awards do you need it for. So it's a good workshop. It's a couple, just 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon, a nice cool afternoon. So I do suggest come out and listen and contribute to that workshop. One of the major changes this year, there's actually been quite a few, is First has retired the Promote Award. So in prior seasons, this was a special optional award that teams would do. What they would do is they put together a video around a season prompt, and then they would submit that video for judging. It turns out not a lot of teams were taking advantage of this optional award, and so First did decide to retire it. So if you're a veteran coach and you're thinking about maybe getting your team together in the next few weeks about putting together a Promote Award, unfortunately it has been retired. So that's less work you have to do. However, this year, for the first time, First Tech Challenge teams have been invited to compete in the Digital Animation Award. And what I mean by that is this is an award that has been a part of the First Robotics competition for a while. And it's a special optional award where teams put together a little animation around a theme, submit it, and you compete nationally with all the other teams that submitted as well. This is an optional award, so you don't have to do it. But the idea behind it and the motivation for it is to help encourage students to cultivate kind of skills in design and creation. So you're really kind of going after more than robots. You're talking about the skill set that's complementary and supplementary to what they're doing with the robot and programming itself. The animation is pretty straightforward. A lot of our students are actually starting to learn this in school already. And there's a lot of creativity out there. And so this animation, the Digital Animation Award, really is a way for students to tap into that creativity and actually show their skills there. This year's theme is simply the one word, dive. And that can be interpreted in any way the team sees fit. It could be diving in the water. It can be diving into new experiences. It can be scuba diving. It can be diving into a project. It can be any creative way where the word or concept of dive is incorporated. And in fact, the final judging doesn't hinge on necessarily the dive theme itself, but more about actually just using the animation skills of the team. This award does have a deadline of January 16th. So you have a little bit of time, but I wanted to share this with you now because, I don't think we actually have another coaches meeting, coaches corner before this deadline passes. What program are they? Oh, so that's really up to the team of what program they want to use for the animation. I don't believe, don't quote me, but I don't believe there's a requirement for the software to create the animation. There's just requirements on the length of the animation itself. So whatever program the students are comfortable with, they can do the animation in. Yeah. I'm going to say 60 seconds is the length, just based on the path and the other awards, Promote and Compass. Those are 60 seconds. I believe the safety award in FRC is also 60 seconds. Double check that on me, though. Don't quote me, even though we're recording this, but I believe it is 60 seconds. There's a link directly to it. And Laura, that's exactly what we're hoping. I don't know if enough FTC teams recognize that this award. Well, this is the first year the Digital Animation Award has been offered to FTC, and it's a great opportunity for kids to kind of, take that extra skills that they have and share it with us. So hopefully we get a couple submissions from Nevada. That'd be great. Okay, I'm going to pause here and see if there are any other cool questions out there. Go ahead, Grace.
Will we be displaying the submissions at state or at the tournament of the Digital Animation Award?
My understanding, this is a new award, is it's not done locally in terms of judging. It is done nationally. And so it's not necessarily our judges involved. In fact, I don't believe it even goes through Scott at the PDP.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. And I would just add on, Grace, and to the people on the call, if they want to submit it to me, I'd be happy to play it at the events. They want to show it off. So, but I think Rubo's correct. The whole submission and judging process is done at the national level, through First headquarters, not through your local PDP or region. But again, if you want to share it and want other people to see it, I'd be happy to play them.
And it looks like, I think, Scott, you found it is actually 30 seconds is the length on it. So I was incorrect there. It's only 30 seconds. So it's a commercial. Yeah, commercial length. And Monica, I'm going to still get to the Dean's List at the end here. We'll have that one up soon. Okay, talking about league play. So we did talk about this at the last Coaches Corner, but I just want to kind of reiterate here because we are at that point in the season that we will be moving into actual league play itself. And in fact, all of the league meets will happen before we meet again for a Coaches Corner. So I want to go through it one more time with everyone. So League Meet is this idea of it's a progression of competitions, if you will, in terms of First Tech Challenge. So League Meet is the idea that we have half-day competitions that involve only the robot. So we have dates here of December 7th, January 11th, and January 25th, of which we will have League Meet play. On each of these days, we will actually have dual League Meets. So we'll have a morning session and a separate afternoon session that are labeled and treated as two separate league meets. So it is possible that a team actually competes in two league meet plays on the same day. But again, the idea is that these teams come together, they compete in just the robot portion of the competition. They vie for ranking points during these matches, and that will ultimately rank them moving on to what we call league tournament. A league tournament is a more involved event. It is a day-and-a-half long event in which we start with a Friday afternoon. We go through inspections with our robots in parallel to doing a judging session. Then on Saturday, we have a couple more qualification matches followed by a playoff system. I'll cover more about the league tournament in our January Coaches Corner because we'll be coming up on our first league tournament, or actually our only league tournaments at that point. After the league tournament, some of our teams will then progress on to a state championship. In terms of format, the state championship is identical to the league tournaments. It involves a Friday evening judging session, qualification matches in the morning on Saturday, and a playoff in the afternoon of Saturday. From that, we will progress on, and some of our teams will represent the state at the World Championships in April. So we have a progression of events moving from those league meets on through to the World Championship. The league meet schedule has been posted, and it's actually gone through, I think, a couple iterations now. The latest has gone up today. Correct, Scott? I think today was the goal. There have been a few movements in terms of getting a few teams changed around since the first posting there. All teams, I do ask that you scan that QR code, go to the FTC Public Resource folder, look up where your team and when your team is scheduled for league meet. If you need to change your scheduled league meets, let Scott know as soon as possible so that we can adjust accordingly. As we're going to talk about in the inspection section, we need to know exactly what teams are expected at an event so that we can get them through inspection and ultimately make our match schedule. In Nevada, I didn't really talk about in this last slide, we have two separate leagues. We have a Northern League, which goes from everywhere from Reno, Carson City, all the way through Elko. So all the teams north of Area 51, if you will. I guess that'd be a good cutoff. And then there's the Southern teams here, which is everything from Pahrump through Las Vegas, Laughlin, and Mesquite are all in those areas. So there are two separate leagues. The leagues do not mix all the way through until the state championship, when all of our teams this year will get together that are participating in the state championship in Las Vegas. So, and the reason I thought about that is I'm looking back on this slide here. You will see that there are two separate pages as part of the league meet assignments, one for that Northern League and one separately for the Southern League. Following the university color system, we usually use blue for our Northern leagues and red for our Southern leagues. I also want to mention as part of this that all teams should have about 3-ish league meet assignments already. Teams are welcome to participate in more. Usually what we do is we ask you, let us know, and you can go into what we call a standby system. What we do at the standby is we give priority to the teams that have been scheduled for that league meet. If on the morning of, or the day of, I should say, because sometimes in the afternoon, at the day of the league meet, if we find out a team does not show or we have enough extra space, at the discretion of the tournament director, they may allow you to then step in and participate. So far this season, it's looking like, with the exception, I believe it was League Meet 3 in the South. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott. I think we've got space. A standby is actually a reasonable possibility. And so teams can probably more likely, don't want to say for sure, get into extra league meets if they so desire. And in fact, in the North, League Meet 1 very much is wide open. So if teams are interested in jumping into that league, please let Scott know. And Henry on that to know if your team wants to participate in that Northern League Meet 1. Okay, there we go in the chat. League Meets 3S and 4S are currently at or over capacity. So the Southern League Meets for 3 and 4 are at capacity. And that, looking at that, that would be this January 11th one is at capacity. Yeah. Now, what you do is, again, at League Meet, it's all about the robot in terms of what you're competing with. So when you come to a League Meet, you should definitely bring that robot for sure. You'll also want to bring some extra tools to actually work on the robot. I always, like when I was coaching, treat it like NASCAR. The robot comes into the pit after match. You go through it. You tighten up all the loose bolts on it. Maybe you have to swap out your robot sign because you're changing alliance. You may even have to swap out a battery because it's been just wearing down. Or as we were talking about earlier, blow some cool air across it to get those Go Builder motors to cool down. Whatever you need to do to get that robot ready for its next match. You also would want to bring some extra batteries. It is about 3-4 hours long, these league meets. Typically, the batteries will start draining at a substantial level, enough so the performance of the robot may be affected. So it's a good idea to bring extra batteries, including a battery charger. You'll definitely want to bring a laptop or some programming device that allows you to program it. A lot of our teams are making slight adjustments, especially to the autonomous code in the early period. So it's helpful to bring along that programming device. Also, if your team maybe struggles getting through inspection and needs to run some updates, it's helpful to have that laptop there to do that. A couple of other important things is you should bring your robot sign. This year, we've moved away from the team alliance markers, and we've gone into this robot sign approach where your team number and your alliance are both on one item now. You also will need to bring safety glasses. You must wear safety glasses anywhere near the field, practice, or the competition field, as well as in the pits. First Nevada does not provide those safety glasses, so you should bring them along. And then the other big thing is the driver buttons here. I should say drive team buttons. These are items that we use to identify who should be at the field. So each team has 2 drivers, a drive coach, and a human player. We use buttons there to identify who they are. At your first competition, your team will receive those buttons. You're then responsible for those buttons throughout the season and ideally through multiple seasons. So you should treat them like gold, wrap them up, protect them, always keep them safe so that you come back each and every meet with the same set of buttons. Now, if there's an emergency that you forget them, just let us know. But ideally, we do want our teams to be responsible for maintaining those drive team buttons through the season. I've already mentioned this. I do want to, this is my other soapbox here. Safety glasses are a requirement of First Tech Challenge. Everyone, both our volunteers, our team members, our coaches, and even our spectators, if they wander into the pits, have to wear safety glasses. We do put that responsibility on the teams to provide their own set of safety glasses. So make sure they're part of your budget. Make sure they're packed up with your kit so that whenever you come to an event, everybody has safety glasses who will be in an area that they must wear it. Again, that's anybody in the pit. That's anyone near the practice field. That's anyone at the competition field. And I do mean anybody, volunteers, coaches, kids, spectators. All of us have to wear safety glasses when we're near the field. And Adam, I would definitely point you to the rules here. There are special specifications that you're supposed to have in terms of your safety glasses. A lot of people wear glasses do also have side shields they put on there as a requirement that you can wear over the top safety glasses as well. A number of us wear glasses, and so there are ways to mitigate or actually solve that question of are prescription glasses okay? But if you do wear if you wear prescription glasses, you definitely at a minimum have to have the side shields put on them. All right, so going back to the league meet idea, a league meet is a half-day event. It's about 4 hours long, give or take a little bit. Depends on the number of teams, depends on how quickly we can get them through inspection, but give or take, it's about 4 hours in length. That's why we do one session in the morning and then a separate session in the afternoon. None of the league meets involve judging. Judging is reserved for just the league tournaments and the state championship. We'll talk about judging in a future Coaches Corner. Just know you don't need to do it at a league meet. Also, the match schedules themselves, we can't give them to you ahead of time because it does depend on who shows up and which robots are able to pass inspection. So the match schedules are generated later into that league meet. At a league meet, the teams will run their robot for about 5 or 6 matches, depending on the schedule itself. Each match, as you know, is 2.5 minutes long. We get in a pretty quick cycle time somewhere in the 7-8 minute cycles. Give a cycle 7 or 8 minutes between matches, if you will. So once we get our matches going, they do come off pretty quickly. So we do ask our teams to kind of stay aware of what match number we're on and when they're queued up to come into the next one. Once we get through inspection, the league meets are very rapid in terms of we're constantly running matches one after another as we put together all of the scores. In terms of scoring, the way we do this is at a league meet, a team, or I should say an alliance, will earn either 2 ranking points if they win the match, or if the 2 alliances tie, you get 1 ranking point and 0 otherwise. Those ranking points are then accumulated throughout all of the league meets, so not just the first league meet or the second one. All throughout the league meets, we take your 10 best matches, and from that, we actually calculate what's called a ranking score, which is your average score across all of your 10 best matches. What's really nice about that is if you do participate in, say, 15 matches, you basically get to throw away 5 of your worst matches and just take your 10 best to calculate your overall league score, your ranking score. This all then will feed into the league tournament, where teams will come in pre-ranked, and then at the league tournament, we add on a handful of additional qualification matches, which then will finalize the ranking for the playoffs that you will find at the league tournament. What this really means, and the important part here, is we do expect all of our teams to participate in at least 2 league meets. That way you can accumulate your 10 league meets, your 10 league meet matches. And if you do an additional league meet, then you have that kind of little buffer there to take the 10 best. Teams in theory could skip the league meets, but then they are very much behind the 8 ball when it comes to being ranked at the league tournament. And it makes it very difficult to make up that ground and to make the playoffs. Also, the league meets are a great opportunity to practice with that robot. Although it's an official scoring match, because we have multiple league meets, you can go back and fix and update your robot and make it better and better. I've always been a strong proponent of be in league meet 1, because then you can have the maximum time of iterating your robot based on what you're seeing and the feedback you see of it actually involved in a match. Now that we are coming up on league meets, I just want to remind you that if you go to FTC events, you can actually stay on top of all of the scoring as well as the current rankings. So if you go to ftc-events.versusvirus.org, you will want to use the little sorting filters there to zero in on Nevada. And then what you can do is just follow along at home with all of the different league meets, including the scrimmages are on there as well, all the way through the championships. So you can see the scorings from different matches throughout the entire season. It's a great resource to go through, especially share this with the kids. They really enjoy seeing where the team is sitting amongst all the teams in the state. And in fact, you can start searching other territories as well to see how are teams in California doing, or over in Australia, and see all kinds of information as well. As a side too, there is another great resource, if you don't know about, called the Orange Alliance. Orange as in the color. If you just Google the Orange Alliance, it's another separate website dedicated to tracking event outcomes and robot performance as well. But the one I have here is the official one, and this is what our scoring software feeds into. So again, if you want to track and follow along at home, this is the website to go to. Okay, I'm going to pause there, take a drink of my grape Gatorade. There we go. See if you have any questions. Last page. Here we go. Boom. There you go. Yep. I always just Google FTC-events, and that's my way of remembering this page. Yeah. And there on the right is a screenshot of what it currently looks like. In fact, I grabbed that screenshot earlier today because of all the league meets and the league tournaments and state championship have already been loaded in. So although we don't necessarily know what all the teams are going to be at each particular event, they are on the schedule. So they are kind of have a placeholder for the moment. Yeah, most definitely. But everyone keeps asking me the Dean's List deadline. Yeah, hold on. I'm getting to the Dean's List stuff. One more section real quick, and then we'll get to the Dean's List. So let's talk about passing inspection. So here's the thing is, at the beginning of every time we compete with our robots, they must first pass inspection. And that means at every league meet and at the league tournament and at the state championship, a robot has to go through inspection before it's allowed to participate in a match. There's a formalized inspection checklist that our volunteers will go through with the teams. The robot must positively pass each one of those items on the checklist to be allowed to participate in the matches. There is a new checklist this year. So if you're a veteran team, do make sure to check it out. It is available online at personspires.org. It's a 2-page checklist. Although it doesn't necessarily use the terminology robot and field inspection, it really is still divided into that 2 sections. One page is dedicated to focusing on the robot itself, and the second page is dedicated to the communication related to that robot. Teams, this checklist is already available, so you should download it, work with it, make sure your robot can pass inspection. In a perfect world, and we do ask us to work towards it, we would love to have it so every robot can pass inspection the moment the team checks in. It does delay us if we are unable to actually get through inspection. So do work with your team members to get that robot through inspection ahead of time. Some of the items that inspectors tend to see that prevents a robot from being passed. One of them is the robot sign. This is new this year, and so it's very important that we share this item out. In previous seasons, we had a robot alliance marker. This year, it is a robot sign. The robot sign indicates the team number as well as which alliance it's on. Teams must have these robot signs built and ready to go before they come to an event. And this is 3 items that we look for on the inspection checklist. So are these robot signs there? Do they have the appropriate size in terms of numbers so they can be read? Do they have the color scheme that we need? And are they present on 2 opposing sides of the robot? These are all very important, and I do want to emphasize this. This needs to be done before you get to the event. And occasionally we do have teams showing up without this ready to go. Now, this is new this year, and so I just want to remind you that it is in the competition manual, so there are specifications for building the robot sign in terms of minimum sizes, color schemes, as well as what is allowed on the sign itself. So please go to that competition manual, read through section 12.4. Do know there are certain minimal requirements in terms of size. It's not much different than what we saw in previous seasons when we had to do a robot number on there, your team number on a robot. Very much the same thing. We just now have to include the alliance color scheme in it as well. This also does mean, because you're going to be changing alliances throughout the entire league play, you need to have a robot sign that can be swapped out very quickly. I've already seen one this year, really cool idea, using magnets. It would just pop off using magnets, a different one would go in, and it would snap into place. Very creative. Now, for teams that maybe forget to build one or on a lower budget, there are 2 very straightforward options here. One is you can go to the QR code on the left, and First has put together a 1-page template. The idea is you print this out in color. You can then take a colored marker, either red or blue, and you can mark out your team number on there, following the instructions. And then you could say laminate it, mount it on a piece of wood or some cardstock, and that would be your robot sign. Alternatively, there's a company called Swift that you can reach out to them, and they have a free robot sign. It literally is free. You just need to go in there, give them some information, they'll send you this robot sign there that you can then change into one that's appropriate for your team. So, oh, cool. And Laura's saying we have a good Tinkercad design. That's awesome. Also, that reminds me, Laura, for those who attended our OnShape workshop earlier this year, one of the things that we did in OnShape was actually design a robot sign as well. But definitely take up Laura on this. I think 3D printing is a very powerful tool, and the robot sign is ideally an item that can be 3D printed. Yeah. Very good. Other items that prevent a robot from passing. One is you need to label and identify your main power switch. So that QR code there takes you to a templated sheet that first is put together that will give you a bunch of power button stickers. Well, I should say they're just not necessarily stickers. You can just tape them onto your robot. But it's very important that your robot has this power switch identified, because there are cases where an FTA like myself has to go in and turn off the robot in a match because it's doing something that's very bad in terms of damaging the field, damaging people, or whatever. We do need to have anybody be able to quickly identify where's the main on-off button on the robot. So this is one of the requirements as part of the checklist. Make sure your main power switch is identified. Also, you need to make sure that you have the correct naming convention associated with your driver hub and your control hub. So there is a specification of what you need to call these items to make them unique to your team. So there has to be a team number followed by either -DS for driver station or -RC for robot controller. This is part of the inspection. We will look and see, did you name these devices appropriate for your team? The main reason behind this is it helps prevent interference between the robots. Do remember, we've got at least 4 robots operating simultaneously, if not more in the room, because there's a few at the practice field as well, or maybe in the pit. So this is a requirement that all of our devices are appropriately named, and we will be checking for that. Other thing is to make sure that your control hub has the correct Wi-Fi that is turned on, that your Bluetooth is turned off, and that you've changed the password on your controllers. This is really important. We don't want anybody to accidentally or maybe unfortunately hack into it. So you are required to change your password on there. And we do want to make sure your Wi-Fi is on, but your Bluetooth is off. This will allow us to make sure the robots, again, are communicating correctly, and they're communicating with the appropriate programming device, so that a team next door isn't accidentally programming yours or vice versa. So again, it's something that we look for. And occasionally we do find teams don't have their Wi-Fi on, or their password is still password. And so we do need to correct that. Lastly, this is a half of a soapbox statement here. As part of the inspection, the last thing we do is we make sure that teams understand the queuing process, the general flow through the event, and we do ask that teams monitor their schedule and monitor the overall schedule. It's really important, as keeping in mind that all of our events are ran by volunteers, that we ask the teams to take responsibility and monitor the schedule so they queue up at the appropriate time. It slows down our events when we have to chase down a team to get them queued up. The worst case is that sometimes a robot is broken and it needs some time to get fixed. Just let us know. That way we understand and we're part of the conversation to figure out what's the best next steps. But we do ask the teams just stay alert, be in time to the queuing, and it allows our matches and an overall schedule to flow quickly. This is technically one of the checklist rules. And so we just make sure that all of our teams are aware of that. So one of the new items this year, and generally the new philosophy, is rather than telling us what can and cannot be on the robot, it's more about what are the general kind of specifications as part of building the robot. And so gone is the legal and illegal part list document that used to be used for a number of years. That has now been replaced by an inspection quick reference. The inspection quick reference gives us some guidance on what is legal and what is illegal when we build our robots. So this is a new document, new for this season. It's a very helpful document because it has a lot of tables in it that help us translate some numbers. It also has, as you can kind of see that from example, some motors that shows us, some servos. It also identifies a few common known illegal parts that teams sometimes try to use. It also has references to wiring diagrams that's important to know. So this is a good document to kind of keep in your back pocket. It helps you build a robot that will pass inspection quickly. And with that, I'm going to pause again. So someone can ask in the chat, when's the Dean's List deadline? Come on, somebody's got to put in the chat. All right, thank you, Jack. All right, so let's talk Dean's List. All right, so Dean's List is a great award. So the idea of the Dean's List is the vast majority of all FIRST awards recognize the achievements of the entire team. There are just a small handful of awards that focus on individuals. Dean's List is one of them. The Compass Award is another one, where we do recognize the achievements of an individual. The Dean's List Award is something that focuses on the students themselves. The eligibility is they have to be 10th or 11th graders, so either 2 or 3 years removed from being graduated. And the Dean's List looks at those students who show strong leadership, that they are participating and sharing FIRST with the community. They themselves are committed to FIRST. They have to be a contributor to their team. They have to show some strong STEM experience, and they have to be motivators of others. These are all leadership skills that we are trying to promote through our program. And so the Dean's List Award recognizes those individuals that have those skills and are really a promoter of FIRST at the same time. This is a wonderful award because it does focus on those individual students who really go above and beyond and becoming that future STEM leader. So the way this works is we start with our state, and the teams within our state are allowed to nominate 2 students to be a Dean's List semifinalist. Each team is allowed up to 2 nominations, and I would strongly encourage you to nominate those students as long as you have 2 students who are in the 10th or 11th grade. Those students will get nominated through a process I'll talk about in a moment. They will then have an interview with some adult judges. They will clarify and get further information about the nomination itself. From that, they will take all of their interviews, compile together, and identify, this year is going to be 3 students who will then become our Nevada finalists. They will be invited to the World Championship in Houston. If they can go, it's great. It's not a requirement, but they can go out to Houston, part of the World Championship, where another panel of judges will review the original nomination. They will review the judges' notes from the interview, and then they will whittle down to find just 10 students for the entire world that will be labeled as Dean's List winners. There is not a second interview. There is not a second essay, as we're going to talk about in a moment. That finalist panel is done through all the paperwork that gets up to that World Championship level. So this is the process. We have semifinalists, which are the collection of students who are nominated by their team to be a Dean's List semifinalist. From that panel, judges will interview them and identify, this year it will be 3 students from the state of Nevada that will then be labeled as Dean's List finalists, who they themselves will be invited to the World Championship in Houston next April. There will be another round of judging, although it does not necessarily involve the students themselves. It involves the judges reviewing the original nomination, and the interviewer notes, they will then identify just 10 students total in the entire world to be the First Tech Challenge Dean's List winners. It's very prestigious to even be nominated at the beginning, at the semifinalists, and it becomes more and more prestigious as you move through to be a finalist and eventually a winner. So the way this works is it starts with a nomination. The nomination is done through the first dashboard. The nominator can be one of the coaches, or if you went through it, you can actually identify an individual to be a Dean's List nominator. This sometimes happens in a situation where the coach is actually a parent of one of the kids being nominated. You then might ask another coach or a parent to step in and fill out the nomination form. But it does start on the first dashboard for the team. There's a selection there. You see, I have it highlighted under the certificates and awards section that you put in the FTC Dean's List Award submission. The submission process itself starts off with 5 questions. Those 5 questions explore those ideas that we were talking about earlier about what makes a strong Dean's List candidate. Things like, do they embody the FIRST ethos? Are they involved with increasing the awareness of FIRST? What is their STEM technical expertise? What are their contributions to the team? And what are their leadership skills like? Each of these essays has a maximum of 800 characters, including punctuation. So it's a very tight essay that you have to write in there. There is a 6th spot that's kind of a catch-all for any additional relevant information. This only has a 500 character limit. So you are very much limited in the information that you can provide in the nomination. There are some cues and some important ways to get students recognized through this. One of the most important things is to incorporate examples. Don't just say the student is great, everybody loves the student. We want to hear, what did that student exactly do that they should be highlighted and nominated for this Dean's List semifinalist. So whoever writes the nomination essays really should be thinking about specifics that identify the skill set of that student. There are no photos and GPAs have been removed. This helps kind of normalize everything. So the idea is that we want to bring out and hide, if you will, all that extra information the photo might have. We also want to remove the GPAs just because different schools use different systems or difficulty levels. And sometimes the GPA doesn't do a good job of reflecting that skill set that really is important for the Dean's List winners. Now, there is a guide. It is newer this year. It's been rewritten. There's a Dean's List nomination guide that will walk you through those questions as well as best practice tips in there. You can access the guide by going to that QR code. The way our season schedule is set up, the deadline for a Dean's List nomination for us is January 15th at 8:59 Pacific time. I keep saying for us is because it's related to when our interviews happen, which will be in February. So that means for us, the deadline is January 15th. And I want to emphasize that if you go and Google when is the Dean's List deadline, it's going to vary by different territories, different states. So it's important to know what is it for Nevada, which for us is January 15th. So all the submissions must be done by then. This is a deadline that happens before our next Coaches Corner. So this will be the last time I can really talk about it in our meetings. I do want to emphasize this is a really easy, no, I don't want to say it that way. This is a great award, and it all depends on you coaches taking the time to fill out this nomination form for our students who have worked so hard and deserve that recognition. So I do ask that you take that time, maybe over the winter break, figure out with your team or your co-coaches who you want to nominate and put together that essay before that January 15th deadline. With that, I'm going to stop, open up the floor to questions. So a team member can nominate someone if I'm a parent of one. I wouldn't necessarily say a phrase team member. But what you can do is have your co-coach or another parent fill out the nomination. You want another adult to do the nomination process itself. If they are a co-coach, they can submit. If they are a parent or a mentor, you actually have to go in and pre-step and add them on your roster as a Dean's List nominator. And you would do that under the contact section. There's actually a special label there for a Dean's List nominator. But yes, if you have your child, and this happened to me personally, I can say my son was nominated, and the way we did it is I recused myself. I did have to put in a parent. She filled out the form completely on her own and submitted it, and that's how it works if you are the parents of the team member. Yeah. Go ahead, Grace.
I have two questions.
What's your best one?
Okay, yes. For FRC, it says that online the deadline is February 6th. Is our deadline still the same as the January one?
Yeah, so our deadline is dictated by when our interviews happen, which is in February. So
Okay.
with FTC, it's related to when is our interview event occurring. FRC is different. And so, yeah, you definitely want to make sure you do that FTC deadline.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then for writing the essay, can you use the person's name and their gender, like pronouns?
I don't think there's any. No, I don't quote me, but I would just definitely suggest going through this. I don't think there's any limitation to that. I don't think it necessarily calls it out though either. So that is a choice the nominator makes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would point you to this nomination guide just to clarify that, so I'm not making things up. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good. Was that both questions in there? Did I miss it? Yeah, you did date and yep, gotcha. Ooh. You know what I forgot to mention is, okay, so as I did say, the deadline is set by when the interviews occur. The reason that is set up that way is so that we can announce the three Nevada finalists at the state championship. And so the timing all works out that this will allow us to announce that at the state championship. Go ahead, Grace.
I think I might know the answer to this, but just to clarify, we have the third ticket for Dean's List based on our population size. So like since we had so many teams last year, they gave us an extra one.
Mm-hmm.
So that would there's only 3 in FTC. Like we're not adding another for FRC because that's a stagnant, like set number for the regional.
Sure, let's go with that. No, I'm pretty sure that's the situation. But I'm less confident in that answer. So the FTC one is dictated by the number of teams. FRC, I'm pretty sure, is 2 per regional.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just add in as a general note, I think even though they both lead to the same conclusion, which is going to the World Championship, and where they announced the 10 FTC winners that Rubo mentioned, as well as the 10 FRC winners worldwide, they announced at the same ceremony. The process, much like the date that you were mentioning a moment ago, the process for FTC and FRC, much like many things between the programs and FIRST, are handled separately, right? So kind of siloed, if you will. It would be a bad assumption, I think, for anything that you see to assume that it's the same for FRC that it is for FTC. I think they're handled very much as 2 separate tracks. And I guess as a comment for anyone on this call who happens to have a team member who's in both programs, they actually can be nominated in both programs, just to point that out too. So in case you're wondering, we do have some kids from time to time who participate both in FTC and FRC. And if that's the case, those again are separate tracks and they could be nominated for both. They could become finalists for both and potentially then be in contention to be a winner for both at the World Championship. So just keep that in mind as well.
Those are all really good questions. Are there any other questions? I'm done for tonight. So, Michelle, that one, I'm gonna leave that one to Scott. How many teams are we having at state this year?
Yeah, I don't know. I admit sometimes I'm typing when Rubo's talking, so maybe I missed that if that came out somehow. But no, yeah, we're sticking with the same plan, which is 24 teams. So currently we have statewide 44 teams registered. So that means there will be, a selective advancement from both our Northern Nevada League tournament and our Southern Nevada League tournament, as before, in proportion to the number of teams participating north and south. To fill those 24 spots at the championship.
Which very thankfully is in a location that's pretty close to my house. So that will make it easier for me to travel to and from state championship.
Or less close to Michelle's house.
That's right. Yeah. And it's right next to our storage locker. So, yeah, we can almost do it in trips on our pickup. Definitely road trip. I can tell you all the good eateries around there. Oh, great. Any other questions? This is our last coaches corner for the next 2 months. We won't have one in December. And so, like I said, we will have completed all of our league meets by the time we meet again, but we will be before the league tournament. So the next coaches corner will be focused on the league tournament and especially the judging component on there as well. Oh, and Laura, that's going to be me. So I will be your point of contact for the Explorer, and I'm going to just push it off 1 week. I just need to get through the last this weekend between our third qualifier and the F1 race. Yes. So Laura, next Monday, Tuesday, well, I should communicate with you more about that. Go ahead, Grace.
Just to clarify from like the event perspective, when I know you kind of talked about it already with the robot inspection. Ideally, if teams can start getting inspected when they check in. So does that mean that inspection opens when team check-in opens?
Yeah. So I don't think I talked about this enough here. So the way an event happens is, especially the league meets, we start by doing the inspections first. And the problem with this, or the challenge I should say with this, is we cannot generate a match schedule until all the robots have passed inspection. So if a robot comes to an event and is unable to pass inspection quickly, it delays the entire event for all of us. Now, there are some reasons I can understand where this happens. But one of the things I do want to emphasize to our teams is that we hope that you're coming to the event with a robot that's ready to at least be looked at for inspection. And what I mean by that is we've had some scenarios and cases in the past where a team comes in with the intention and planning of continuing to build the robot to pass inspection. And that's the sort of thing we want to avoid, is that once you get through your check-in, you settled in at your pit, you should be really looking at when can and how quickly can I get through inspection. And so ideally the bottleneck, it happens more so of just being in a queue for inspection than waiting for a team to add an attachment to the robot or build a robot sign for the first time, which are things we have seen in the past. So hopefully, Grace, that might be what you're kind of questioning, addressing.
Yeah, I just wanted clarity on inspection opens when teams check in, or are we waiting like 30 minutes or?
That really comes down to the organization of ourselves. In a dream world, we have a couple of volunteers ready to start inspection as soon as teams are checked in. We also, the other thing is we do have to have the driver's meeting, which we squeeze in at the end of the inspection period after teams are either at or nearly all past inspection.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and even though it's not published on the public calendar, the overall schedule, we have usually volunteer arrival doors open time that's 30 to 60 minutes ahead of when the teams are asked to arrive. And as Rubo said, the goal at least is that we are ready for inspection. So whatever that doors open to teams time is in the calendar entries that you see there, the intention is that, as soon as the teams start coming in and checking in, inspection should be open at that point so they can start inspecting immediately.
Yep. Yeah, so usually, like I said, we're about 4 hours, hour and a half, almost sometimes 2 hours. It's just inspection. So it'd be nice to shorten that up a little bit. But we know there's times that things just don't quite work right or whatever. We just try and eliminate those teams who come in knowing they're going to still be building or expecting to be building still to pass inspection. Cool. Well, we did go over. We did have a little bit of a late start. It's good. It's okay. Are there any last questions?
Hi. Yes. Sorry. My co-coach just wrote me. Since we're going to be inspectors on the January 11th meet, do we need to do some online learning before we show up to do inspections?
I don't. Is it blue, Scott? Is there a Blue Vault for? I know there is training, but it's usually documentation, right? Is there actually a Blue Vault?
Yeah, I mean, there's both. So, yeah, you're correct. There is documentation that you can just read online, without, I guess, I'll put that in the chat real fast. Monique, if you want to see that. I mean, so this page has all of the volunteer roles, including the guides that you would, in theory, would see if you take the Blue Vault training. But, basically, what happens is if you've already applied to be a volunteer or your team members have, eventually our volunteer coordinator will assign you. Once they assign you, then that training becomes available to you. So if you're on your volunteer page inside the dashboard, right, there's the 4 tabs. So one of the tabs is volunteer. If you're on that tab, it will basically show you what roles, as it words it, requires certification or has certification missing. So if you click on it, it'll basically say, do you want to resolve that? And you'll say, yeah. And it takes you to a different site, which is called Blue Vault. And that's where First hosts all of its online training for all the roles. So it's not just the inspector, but, judge, referee, whatever else. And so you can then take that training. And when you finish, then you'll receive a little certificate. And in the background, our volunteer coordinator will actually see that you have passed that training. So that'll kind of signal to her that, you've completed the training for that role. But yes, there is training. There isn't training for all roles. It kind of depends, but certainly for some of the more I guess I would say, content specific type roles, and that includes the inspector, there is training.
So do we need to have all the team members that are coming to volunteer go through the training?
Ideally, yes. I mean, we do some on-the-job training, and we never want a volunteer not to show up just because maybe they didn't finish the training. Okay. So we can definitely do some on-site training and pair up, those team members with an experienced inspector. But yeah, the idea or goal is that I guess the volunteers that we have at least attempted, but hopefully have completed the training, so they're prepared for that role.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I was just reading through the checklist today. It seems like they've simplified it, and it looks pretty straightforward. Especially any veteran knowledge is very straightforward to go through the inspection itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think your description before was very accurate. The idea that I think, like many things, perhaps this season, not just with the rule changes, but I think there's a little bit of a philosophy change there too, in terms of how they expect, I guess, the inspectors to fulfill that role, how they go about doing their inspection. So that's a good point.
All right. One last call. Questions? Nice. Well, if not, I'm going to call it a night. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Good luck this season. Can't wait to see everyone.